Samson, the son of Manoah from the tribe of Dan, was born in a time of oppression and despair for the Israelites. His birth was foretold by an angel of the Lord, who instructed his mother to strictly follow the laws of the Nazirite vow during pregnancy and beyond, as Samson would be consecrated to God from the womb. The Nazirite vow was sacred and involved abstaining from wine, not cutting one's hair, and avoiding certain foods, among other restrictions. Samson's life was destined to be different from the beginning, marked by divine dedication. The Philistines ruled over the land of Israel, imposing their will with force and military superiority. They were an aggressive people, skilled in the use of iron, and governed by tyrants in their cities. Their influence extended from the coast to the interior, making life difficult for the Israelites, whose progress as a nation was constantly hindered by the advances of the Philistines. For the Israelites, the Philistines represented not only a physical threat but also a spiritual one, as they worshipped foreign gods in their sanctuaries. Samson grew up under the shadow of this oppression, aware of his destiny from birth. His strength was legendary, a gift granted by God to free his people from the bonds of the Philistines. But with this gift came immense responsibility, a mission that would follow him throughout his life. He was not just an ordinary man. He was the chosen one to lead Israel to liberation, to challenge the power of the Philistines, and to restore the glory of his people. However, even with all this divine expectation upon him, Samson was not immune to worldly temptations. His life was marked by triumphs and tragedies, by choices that led him to both glory and ruin. His weakness for women, especially a Philistine named Delilah, would become his downfall. Betrayed by her, Samson lost not only his physical strength but also his sight, becoming a prisoner of his enemies. The story of Samson is a saga of courage, betrayal, and redemption, a narrative that echoes through the centuries as a reminder of the power of faith, human frailty, and the pursuit of divine justice. Even chained in a Philistine prison, blind and helpless, Samson's indomitable spirit remained unbroken, waiting for the right moment to fulfill the purpose for which he was destined from his mother's womb. In the society we lived in, the birth of a child, especially if it was a boy, was a cause for great celebration. It was not only a matter of continuing the family lineage, but also carried with it the hope of leadership and prestige, both within the home and in the community. Additionally, outside the boundaries of Israel, a son was considered crucial for present and future well-being, both in this life and the next. The narrative begins with the account of my mother's encounter with a heavenly messenger, a man of God who resembled an angel. He announced to her that she would conceive and give birth to a son. This news was received with joy, but also with a measure of apprehension, as it brought with it a divine calling and a unique responsibility. My father, upon hearing this, sought further guidance. He yearned for a manual that would clearly outline the purpose and destiny of the son who was to come. He prayed fervently for the angel of the Lord to return and provide more instructions about me. God, in his mercy, answered this prayer, and the angel appeared again to my mother while she was in the field. My father seized the opportunity to question the angel about the rules that should govern my life and work. The angel instructed that my mother should abstain from certain foods and drinks, and that I would be dedicated to God's service from birth. It was not a detailed manual, but a fundamental guideline on how to live a life of purpose and consecration. After this revelation, the angel of the Lord performed a miraculous act, ascending to heaven in the flame of the sacrifice. This event left my father fearful, as he thought that, having seen the Lord, they were condemned to die. However, my mother, in her deep faith, reminded him of God's past blessings and his promise of future care. And so, even in the face of fear and uncertainty, my mother remained a rock of faith and encouragement for my father. She did not doubt God's promises, but embraced them with confidence and hope. And as prophesied, I was born and named Samson. This story not only illustrates the importance of faith and obedience to God's commandments, but also highlights the crucial role my mother played as a source of encouragement and support for my father in times of challenge and uncertainty. She was a living witness of God's faithfulness and a constant reminder that he always fulfills his promises. Samson, whose name means little son in Hebrew, was seen as a man destined for greatness from his birth. Growing up, he displayed exceptional strength that set him apart from ordinary men, a blessing he believed came from the Lord. However, like any other man, he was not immune to the temptations of the world. One day, while in Timnah, a Philistine city in the land of Canaan, Samson came across a Philistine woman who immediately captured his attention and heart. It was a case of love at first sight. Determined to marry her, he returned home and expressed his desire to his parents, instructing them to obtain the woman for him, despite her Philistine origin. Samson's parents initially opposed the idea, concerned about their son's choice to marry someone from outside his tribe and even his nation. They questioned why he needed to go to the Philistines for a wife when he could find one among his own people. However, Samson was resolute, insisting that the woman pleased him and that he wanted her. Arranged marriages were common in Samson's time, often conducted to secure alliances and ensure family continuity. However, marrying a Philistine posed a unique challenge as it implied mutual acceptance between clans and could lead to religious conflicts, as Moses had warned. Though his parents expressed concerns about the consequences of this choice, Samson persisted in his desire. He was willing to defy social norms and even religious warnings to follow his heart. Eventually, after his insistence, his parents yielded to his wishes, and Samson obtained the woman he desired. This love story illustrates Samson's stubbornness and determination to follow his desires, even if it meant challenging the social and religious norms of his time. His journey to Timnah to seek a wife marked a crucial turning point in his life. As he set out with his family towards Timnah, Samson did not anticipate facing such a significant challenge. During the journey, while he was alone near the vineyards of Timnah, a young lion attacked him. What could have been a fatal situation for anyone else became a moment of revelation for Samson. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, granting him supernatural strength. With his bare hands, Samson tore the lion's jaws apart, demonstrating his strength and uniqueness. The scene was even more remarkable because, as a Nazirite, Samson had taken a vow that prohibited him from having any involvement with grape products. The fact that a lion crossed his path in a place associated with wine production was, in itself, unusual. To Samson, the lion was not an insurmountable threat. It was more like dealing with a household pet. Despite this extraordinary event, Samson chose not to share it immediately with his family. He was determined to fulfill his mission of seeking a wife in Timnah. Upon arriving there, Samson found the woman he would marry and was pleased with her, indicating that everything was going according to plan. However, his journey was not yet over. As he returned home, he passed by the spot where he had faced the lion. To his surprise, the lion's carcass was covered in honey, attracting a swarm of bees. As a reward for his triumph over the lion, Samson collected some honey and ate it, also offering it to his parents. However, he kept the origin of the honey a secret, as this act violated his Nazirite vow. Back in his city, Samson took part in the pre-wedding festivities, following the customs of the time. He organized a feast in Timnah that would last 7 days, as was traditional among the elite youth. This feast was an intense celebration, culminating in the consummation of the marriage. For Samson, the celebration was particularly challenging, as his Nazirite vow prohibited him from consuming grape-derived products. Nevertheless, despite all the restrictions and challenges, Samson emerged as a prominent and respected figure during this period. His status as a Nazirite and his extraordinary abilities set him apart from others, making him the center of attention during the wedding preparations. He said to them, "Let me tell you a riddle. If you solve my riddle during these 7 days of celebration, I will give you 30 fine linen tunics and 30 sets of festive clothes. But if you cannot solve it, then you must give me 30 fine linen tunics and 30 sets of festive clothes." They accepted. "Very well, let us hear your riddle." So I said, "Out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet." 3 days later, they were still trying to figure out the answer. On the 4th day, they said to my wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle to us, or we will burn down your father's house with you in it. Did you invite us to this feast only to impoverish us?" Then my wife came to me crying and said, "You don't love me. You hate me. You gave a riddle to my people but haven't told me the answer." I said, "I haven't even given the answer to my father or my mother. Why should I tell you?" Then she cried whenever she was with me and continued this way for the rest of the celebration. Finally, on the 7th day, I told her the answer because she was tormenting me with her weeping. She then explained the riddle to the young men. So before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the city came to me with the answer. "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" The willingness of my Philistine wife to side with her people against me was a deep sorrow for me. Angrily, I replied, "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle." My wife had gotten what she wanted through manipulation, but she lost my respect. I paid the debt, but I did so at the expense of the Philistines. I struck down 30 of those enemies. I went to the city of Ashkelon, killed men, took their belongings, and gave their clothes to the men who had solved my riddle. But I was still furious about what had happened, so I returned home to live with my father and mother. Later, during the wheat harvest, when I was at peace, I took a young goat as a gift for my wife. I said, "I will go into my wife's room to sleep with her," but her father did not let me enter. My wife had been given to my companion, who had been my best man at the wedding. I won the battle, but I lost the war. My wife had left me. "I really thought you hated her," exclaimed her father, "so I gave her in marriage to your best man. But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful. Take her instead." Samson, a man of supernatural strength, is known for his ability to face the Philistines, ancient enemies of the people of Israel. His story is full of tragedy and vengeance, as narrated in the biblical book of Judges. It begins with Samson, furious and determined to retaliate against the Philistines over a series of bitter events. He declares his intention to be blameless for what he will do to them this time. His rage is primarily directed at the Philistine people, and he devises a cunning plan to attack them. Samson demonstrates his skill by first overpowering a lion and then capturing 300 foxes. Tying their tails together in pairs and placing torches between them, he lights the foxes on fire and releases them into the Philistines' grain fields, destroying their crops, vineyards, and olive groves. When the Philistines discover who is responsible for the devastation, they take revenge, capturing and executing Samson's wife and her father. Consumed by grief and rage, Samson makes an unrelenting vow of vengeance against the Philistines. He then attacks the Philistines with fury, seeking refuge in the rock of Etam. The Philistines retaliated, camping in Judah and threatening the local population. Under pressure from the Philistines, 3,000 men of Judah decide to capture Samson to hand him over to their enemies. Confronted by men of his own tribe, Samson accepts his capture, but demands their promise not to kill him. Though a man of great physical strength, he is not invincible. The men of Judah agree to only tie him up and deliver him to the Philistines. This tragic episode reveals the depth of the Philistine oppression over Israel, which prefers to yield to its enemies' demands rather than support its own hero Samson. Samson's story is marked by tragedy, vengeance, and the fight against oppression. It was a sunny afternoon when I found myself before the Philistines, a roaring crowd cheering as they dragged me across the rough rock. My apparent submission only fueled their fervor, their laughter echoing across the valley walls. I felt the new ropes tight around my wrists, but inside me, something began to grow, a primal force that could not be contained. We arrived at Lehi, the air thick with tension and expectation. The Philistines gathered around like vultures waiting for their prey, eager to witness my final defeat. But then something extraordinary happened. The Spirit of the Lord came upon me with overwhelming intensity, a divine energy blazing within. With a primal scream, I lifted my arms, and the ropes binding me dissolved as if they were mere threads of linen. Free, I grabbed the jawbone of a fallen donkey, an unlikely weapon in my hands, and with it I defied the Philistine horde. 1,000 men fell under the fury of my blows, each strike driven by an unyielding resolve. I was an army of one, a force of nature guided by divine power. When the battlefield finally grew silent, only I remained standing, the silence hanging heavy like a shroud over the fallen. With the bloody jawbone still in my hand, I lifted my gaze to the heavens, a mix of gratitude and awe. And so, the hill where the Philistine bodies lay was named Jawbone Hill, a silent testament to my victory over the enemy. But my journey was far from over. After this remarkable feat, I was called to serve as a judge in Israel, a position of great responsibility and honor. However, the title of judge did not fully capture what I represented. To me, it was more than simply judging. It was solving the people's problems, protecting them from surrounding dangers. For 2 decades, I led Israel through turbulent times, challenging the Philistine oppressors and upholding justice and freedom. But even the strongest have their weaknesses, and I was no exception. On one fateful night in Gaza, I succumbed to the temptation of the flesh, crossing the boundaries set by my faith and duty. The Gazites, ever cunning, learned of my presence and planned my downfall. They arranged an ambush while I rested in the house of a prostitute, waiting for dawn to destroy me. Yet I would not be defeated so easily. Under the cover of darkness, I lifted the heavy city gates of Gaza, tearing them from their foundations as if they were feathers. Bearing the burden on my shoulders, I defied the Gazites, carrying the gates to the top of a nearby hill, a defiant gesture to all who dared oppose me. These gates were not mere obstacles. They were symbols of my enemy's power and strength, now brought low by my unrelenting determination. But despite all my victories, pride and arrogance still resided in my heart, a weakness that would eventually lead to my downfall. It was an age of distant lands and clashing kingdoms, where tales were woven between whispered shadows and the sighs of lovers. On one of these journeys, I encountered Delilah, a woman whose beauty transcended mere mortality, capable of ensnaring even the firmest souls in her seductive web. Delilah was not just a beautiful woman. She was shrewd, with eyes that seemed to read the soul of anyone who met her gaze. And I, reckless wanderer, could not resist her charms. I, who sought the purity of divine purpose, found myself entangled in a forbidden passion, surrendering my heart to someone who should never have had it. I maintained the outward appearances of my commitment to God, zealously keeping the Nazirite vow I had taken, while secretly indulging in sin's most profane form. Like many before me, I compartmentalized my life, believing that some areas were acceptable in God's eyes, while others didn't matter. In the midst of these moral dilemmas, I found myself in hostile Philistine territory, where the rulers longed for my blood as a tribute to their dominance. They saw in Delilah an opportunity to capture me, offering her a considerable sum of silver for my whereabouts. Delilah, though deeply infatuated, loved money even more. She accepted their offer and with it, sealed my fate. She came to me, pleading, asking me to reveal the secret of my superhuman strength. And I, blinded by passion and misplaced trust, gave in. First, I told her that if I were bound with 7 fresh bowstrings, I would lose my strength. Delilah did as I asked, but I failed to notice the trap she wove around me. When I was supposedly attacked, I broke the strings as if they were strands of silk burning in a fire. Then she tried again, weaving the 7 locks of my hair into a web, believing that by doing so, I would become as weak as any ordinary man. Again, I was caught in her schemes, but I awoke in time to undo her spell. Desperate to discover the secret of my strength, Delilah pressed me incessantly until, weakened by her torment, I revealed the truth. My strength lay in my hair, never cut since I was consecrated to God as a Nazirite from birth. Betrayed by greed and treachery, Delilah did not hesitate to cut my locks while I slept, delivering me to the enemies who so eagerly sought my downfall. When I awoke, deceived by confidence in my own strength, I did not realize that the Lord had abandoned me, and I was captured without a fight, in a moment of spiritual and physical weakness. On that fateful day, my strength abandoned me, leaving me vulnerable to those who plotted my fall. I was captured defenseless like a lamb before ravenous wolves. I watched helplessly as my captors celebrated their conquest, as if I were merely a trophy in their cruel hands. I'd been led astray by reckless desires, blinded by the pursuit of fleeting pleasures. My stubbornness left me without freedom, imprisoned in invisible chains before they were turned into chains of bronze. And so I was taken to Gaza, where I was forced to work like an animal grinding grain in the suffocating darkness of a cell. But even in the depths of my disgrace, I found solace in the faith that still pulsed in my heart. I cried out to the Lord God, seeking a ray of hope in the oppressive darkness of my prison, and He answered me. In an unexpected moment, I felt a change within me. My hair, symbol of my lost strength, began to grow again. It was a sign that all was not lost, that there was still a chance for redemption, an opportunity to avenge my enemies and restore my people's lost honor. Meanwhile, the Philistine rulers celebrated their supposed victory with a grand festival in honor of their god Dagon. They offered sacrifices at the feet of the statue, half man, half fish, representing their deity, proclaiming that their victory over me was a sign of Dagon's benevolence. But I knew that the true victory was yet to come, for my God had not abandoned me, even in the darkest moments of my life. Dagon, whose majestic image rose above the temples as a silent guardian of the waters, In legends and ancient representations, he resembled a giant, sometimes taking the form of a merman, half man and half fish, an imposing figure that echoed the vastness of the seas. The wise men called him the fish god, a deity revered by the Philistines whose influence extended across coastal lands. In the shadows of the temples, Dagon reigned in majesty, and his son Baal stood beside him, sharing the fervor of the worshippers. The worship of Dagon flowed like the tides, with temples built in his honor throughout Mesopotamia. Beth Dagon, Gaza, and Ashdod were sanctuaries where his devotees came to pay homage, offering sacrifices and celebrating festivals in his name. Amid the fervor of devotion, a shadow rose in the form of a man, Samson. He was a foreigner, an enigma to the Philistines, whose presence evoked both admiration and fear. For some, he was a symbol of strength, a living testament to Dagon's greatness. For others, he was a challenge, a threat to established powers. But Samson was not immune to human frailties. His disobedience led him down tortuous paths where pride and lust intertwined in his downfall. Half intoxicated by power and the seduction of sin, people cried for entertainment, for vengeance against the one who had defied their gods. And so, in a grand display, Samson was brought into the spotlight, surrounded by the mocking gazes of the Philistines. Among the columns supporting the temple, he found himself like an actor on a dark stage, ready for his final act. As the Philistine rulers watched from above, Samson raised his hands to the columns, a gesture of supplication and redemption. In his blind eyes, a light shone, a flame of determination that burned stronger than ever. He called upon the Lord, asking for strength for one final blow to pay for his transgressions with his own life. And so, with one last breath of courage, Samson pushed the columns with all his might, surrendering himself to death along with his enemies. In the rubble of the fallen temple, his story found its end, a tale of heroism and intertwined tragedy, a lesson on the limits of strength and the fragility of the human soul. But even in the darkness of defeat, there was a spark of redemption. For in his final sacrifice, Samson found the strength to triumph over his own demons, thus fulfilling his destiny with dignity and courage. And so, his story echoes through the centuries, an eternal reminder of the struggle between power and humility, between temptation and redemption. My name is Samson, and this is my story.